Russian actor and Putin supporter Oscar Kucherov recently claimed in an interview that the United States is directly fighting against Russia. But when the interviewer suggested that he give up his son's American passport, he answered that it was just populism and that America was not really an enemy to Russians. He is far from the first or the last person to speak this way. Millions, perhaps even billions of people around the world criticize the United States, yet most of them still use American products, technologies, and inventions. The most successful among them often dream about an American diploma or even an American passport for their children. For decades, people have predicted the collapse of the United States, but the country continues to hold its position. In this episode, we will talk about how the United States became a global leader. You will learn how geography helped America, which famous inventors were immigrants, and what African proverb became the unofficial motto of American foreign policy. The United States was incredibly lucky with geography. The country contains 7 climate zones, from the frozen lands of Alaska to the tropical regions of Hawaii and Florida. Coastlines along 2 oceans and the Gulf of Mexico made trade and access to world markets much easier. At the same time, the oceans separated America from powerful enemies. Invading the country was difficult, and throughout history, only a few nations even attempted it. Not every country receives such a jackpot in the geographic lottery. But geography alone does not guarantee success. It is similar to a talented person being born with natural abilities. Talent is important, but without hard work it means little. The same rule applies to nations. Europeans colonized the territory of today's United States for nearly 2 centuries. But in the 1770s, the British colonies rebelled, and after the War of Independence, a new nation was born. From that moment, the construction of a state without a political past truly began almost from zero. Few people remember that during the first years after independence, the United States was actually a confederation with a very weak central government and serious instability. In 1787, the Constitution was adopted, creating a political system that in many ways resembles modern America, including the office of the president. 2 years later, the first 10 amendments were added to the Constitution. They guaranteed basic rights and freedoms such as freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to peaceful assembly, and the right to bear arms. Even today, these principles remain sacred foundations of the American system. Immigrants always played an extremely important role in American society. Many settlers dreamed of building in the New World the freedoms they lacked in Europe. One of the founding fathers, Thomas Paine, famously wrote that Europe, not England, was the true parent of America. He described the New World as a refuge for people persecuted for supporting civil and religious freedom. A German immigrant in the 19th century described America as a country free from despotism, privileged classes, unbearable taxes, and restrictions on faith and conscience. According to him, people could travel and settle wherever they wished without passports or police interference. Later, this mixture of cultures and ethnic groups became known as the melting pot. Supporters of this idea believed it helped avoid conflicts between different communities. For a long time, the United States saw its role in the world through the principles announced by President James Monroe in 1823. At that time, Latin American nations were fighting for independence while European empires hoped to restore control over them. Monroe declared that the Western Hemisphere was the sphere of influence of the United States and warned European powers to stay away. In return, America promised not to interfere in European affairs. This became known as the Monroe Doctrine and shaped American foreign policy for almost a century. America's neighbors were too weak to threaten its territory, giving the country time to solve internal problems such as slavery and economic development. Then came one of the greatest discoveries in American history. In 1848, James Marshall found gold in California, beginning the famous gold rush. Thousands of people traveled west hoping to become rich overnight. The population of San Francisco exploded within only a few years. Another massive breakthrough followed with the discovery of oil. By the 1860s, oil fields had been found in Kentucky, Ohio, California, and the Midwest. Soon, the powerful Standard Oil Company, led by John Rockefeller, entered the global market. Around the same time, the first transcontinental railroad connected California with the center of the country. No railway system of that scale existed anywhere else in the world. Where railroads appeared, economies expanded, jobs increased, and migration grew. America became known as a land of opportunity where background and family history mattered far less than ambition and hard work. This idea later became known as the American dream. Yet one major problem still remained. The distance between the east and west coasts of the United States was enormous, almost 5,000 kilometers. Ships traveling from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific had to sail all the way around South America. A faster route was desperately needed. The solution was the Panama Canal. The project was planned in the 19th century and completed in the 20th. It reduced the sea route between New York and California by nearly 13,000 kilometers and transformed global trade. At the turn of the century, the United States also built a powerful navy. American strategist Alfred Thayer Mahan argued that control of the seas was the key to world dominance. He believed America had to surpass Britain, then the ruler of the oceans. The United States Navy soon became the dominant force in the Caribbean and an important power in the Pacific. This was clearly demonstrated during the Spanish-American War of 1898. Spain could not compete with the young and ambitious United States, which seized Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. But even more important changes were happening away from the battlefield. The late 19th century became a period of rapid industrialization in America. Inventions that transformed the world appeared one after another. Isaac Singer improved the sewing machine. The Wright brothers created the first airplane. Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, improved the electric light bulb, and developed early motion picture technology. Inventors from around the world moved to the United States. The country offered huge economic opportunities, free enterprise, strong markets, and most importantly, protection for intellectual property. America became the first country where patent rights were clearly protected by law. Among the immigrant scientists and inventors who came to America were British chemist Joseph Priestley, telephone inventor Alexander Graham Bell, and Nikola Tesla, whose ideas revolutionized electrical engineering. The results of this technological explosion were incredible. During the second half of the 19th century, iron production in the United States increased 8 times, coal mining 10 times, and steel production more than 150 times. The total value of industrial output tripled, while the number of industrial workers grew rapidly. By the beginning of the 20th century, the United States was not yet the undisputed leader of the world, but millions of people already wanted to move there. Immigration became so massive that the government introduced restrictions. One of the clearest symbols of American growth was the skyscraper. For more than a century, the tallest buildings on Earth stood in New York and Chicago. The 20th century began with America possessing enormous economic and industrial potential. President Theodore Roosevelt popularized an African proverb that became famous worldwide: "Speak softly and carry a big stick." This idea became the unofficial motto of American foreign policy. Industrialist Henry Ford completely changed the world's understanding of manufacturing and business. His assembly line methods allowed factories to produce goods faster and cheaper than ever before. America's entry into World War I marked its arrival in European politics. The United States entered the war late, after years of debate, but eventually played a major role in shaping the post-war world. President Woodrow Wilson became one of the leading architects of the new international order. During the war, the United States eliminated much of its debt and instead became a creditor to many nations. By 1920, America produced more than half of the world's industrial goods, half of its coal, 2/3 of its oil, and 85% of all oil. In the early 20th century, New York became the largest city on Earth, surpassing London. America's economic power seemed unstoppable. But in 1929, the country was hit by one of the worst economic disasters in history, the Great Depression. Millions lost their jobs, banks collapsed, and poverty spread across the nation. Yet those who survived the crisis later witnessed a period of extraordinary prosperity, especially after World War II. The Second World War left the United States stronger and richer than before. Unlike Europe and Asia, America suffered very little destruction on its own territory. Before entering the war, the country traded with many sides of the conflict, and after victory, its industries expanded even further. Following the war, the United States invested heavily in manufacturing and services. The standard of living for ordinary Americans increased dramatically. Families could now afford cars, washing machines, and modern homes. A strong middle class emerged. From 1947 to 1973, the average real income of American families doubled. One of the most important international investments was the Marshall Plan, a massive program designed to rebuild Europe after the war. At the same time, America continued to demonstrate military strength. The United States created the first atomic bomb, maintained the world's largest navy, and built military bases across the globe. Britain, weakened after the collapse of its empire, gradually lost its role as leader of the Western world. The United States took its place. America also used its power aggressively. It supported coups, intervened in foreign governments, and sent troops to places such as Panama and Grenada. Wars in Vietnam and Iraq became deeply controversial, criticized not only abroad but also by many Americans themselves. Despite these controversial actions, the United States maintained one important value: democracy. American citizens openly protested against government decisions, including wars and foreign interventions. A strong civil society remained one of the foundations of the country. After the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944, the American dollar became the main currency of global trade. Oil and many international transactions were tied directly to the dollar, giving the United States enormous financial influence. Throughout its history, the United States has never experienced a successful military coup or complete seizure of power by one ruler. This stability comes from its political system of checks and balances. The executive, legislative, and judicial branches limit one another. The two major political parties constantly compete for influence, creating additional oversight. Federalism also plays a major role. Each state has significant independence and can make many of its own laws and decisions. In many ways, every state functions almost like a small country inside a larger union. America also continues to attract talented people from around the world. The country has won more Nobel Prizes than any other nation, far ahead of Britain in second place. American universities regularly dominate global rankings and remain among the most desired places for higher education and scientific research. Finally, there is American culture. Hollywood movies, fast food chains, music, technology, and entertainment spread across the planet. Whether people love or hate them, American cultural products influence billions of lives. The United States is far from perfect and faces many serious problems. No country is ideal. Yet America remains one of the most powerful and influential nations in the world, and it is impossible to predict how long this position will continue.